Ever feel like when you're learning about history, it's more than just, dates and battles? Like there's this hidden engine driving everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we're about to like crack open that engine and
We're going dip.
it's got Karl Marx's name all over it.
Yeah.
You've brought us, this treasure trove of excerpts on the man whose ideas, they're still sparking debate, centuries later.
Crazy, right?
So we're going deep, right? On his big ideas, his major works, and like why they might be even more relevant in our world
More than ever.
of tech giants and gig work.
It's true. What's fascinating is just how timely his critiques feel even today.
Right?
He wasn't predicting the iPhone or anything,
Right.
but he was really dissecting the DNA of capitalism in a way that's almost like eerie to revisit now.
It's true. Okay, so for those of us who, only remember Marx from a dusty textbook,
Right.
who was this guy and why should we care about him in the age of algorithms?
Okay, so Marx, he was born in 1818, right when the Industrial Revolution was kicking off. Okay, imagine cities exploding in size, factories churning out goods. But the workers in those factories, they weren't exactly getting rich.
Of course not.
And that contrast, right, that fueled his entire life's work.
That makes sense.
Huh.
Okay, so he saw this massive shift happening,
Yeah.
right? But what was, his big idea? What made him different from everyone else who's thinking about this stuff?
He basically flipped the script on its head.
How so?
Back then, history, it was all about kings and queens, big ideas from philosophers,
The great man theory of history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Marx was like, nope. He said it's about the stuff, like the material conditions, how we produce things, who controls that production. That's the real story.
Interesting.
He called it historical materialism.
Okay, so instead of ideas shaping us, it's the tools, the resources, the stuff that we're after that shapes history.
Exactly. Think about the printing press.
Okay.
Before that, knowledge was literally locked up in monasteries, right? Printing press comes along, boom. Information explodes, you get the Reformation, challenging the power structures of the time. That's historical materialism in action.
Wow. Okay, I see the wheels turning here. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's all about control of the means of production, as they say, who are the key players in this historical drama?
All right, so on one side, you've got the bourgeoisie, the owners,
Okay.
the folks with the factories and all the capital.
Right.
And on the other side, you've got the proletariat, the working class.
Okay.
And Marx argued that this struggle, this tension between them, it's built into the system itself.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. This feels incredibly real when you look at today, right? When we see debates about wage gaps, worker rights, the power of corporations. It's like Marx is hiding in plain sight in all those headlines.
Oh, absolutely. He argued that capitalism, for all its innovation, is inherently unstable.
Oh, interesting.
It's got this built-in flaw.
A flaw. Spill the tea. What is this fatal flaw?
He called it exploitation. And this is where the concept of surplus value comes in.
Okay.
Stay with me here. This is key.
Right.
Workers create value through their labor, right?
Right.
But they're only paid a fraction of that value in wages.
Okay.
The rest, that surplus, goes to the capitalists as profit.
Interesting. So you're saying every time we buy that fancy coffee, there's this invisible math happening where someone somewhere isn't getting their fair share.
In a nutshell, that's Marx's argument, yeah.
Why?
And it's the system where profit relies on this gap between what's produced and what's paid. That's what he believed would eventually unravel capitalism.
Whoa, strong words. But before we get to the capitalism crumbling predictions, let's talk about the book that made Marx, a household name, for better or worse, I guess, the Communist Manifesto.
Right, right. And it's not just a book, it's a call to arms. Published when Europe was a powder keg of revolutions, 1848.
Wow.
Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. You can practically hear the cobblestones flying when you read that.
That's some pure revolutionary energy right there.
Huh.
But Marx wasn't just about fiery pamphlets. He also wrote the behemoth that is Das Kapital, which I'll admit seems a bit daunting.
It's dense, yes, but
Yeah.
it's where he really meticulously dissects the machinery of capitalism.
Yeah.
Think of it as an X-ray of the system's inner workings.
Okay, so X-ray vision time. What are some of the money bones Marx uncovers in Das Kapital?
One of the big ones is this idea of alienation.
Okay.
Marx argued that under capitalism, workers become alienated from their labor, the products they create, even from themselves.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Picture a factory worker on an assembly line just repeating the same task, endlessly.
Right.
They might never even see the final product, let alone feel any, real connection to it.
Right. It's like their labor just becomes another cog in the machine instead of an expression of, their skill and creativity.
Exactly. Marx saw that as dehumanizing.
Yeah.
He believed that work should be something we find inherently meaningful, not just a means to an end.
Right.
But under capitalism, he argued that our labor is reduced to just another commodity, something to be bought and sold.
Right.
And it's that process, he argued, that alienates us from our own humanity.
Yeah, and this alienation, it's not just about factory workers, right? I mean, think about the graphic designer churning out logos they don't care about. The writer's stuck in a content mill.
Precisely. This alienation, it seeps into every corner of life under capitalism,
Yeah.
It's that feeling of being trapped on a hamster wheel, working just to consume, never quite feeling fulfilled.
Oof, yeah. That hits close to home. So we've got historical materialism, class struggle, surplus value, alienation. Marx certainly wasn't afraid to, tackle the big issues. But how did his, intellectual heavyweight peers respond to all of this? Did they engage in any philosophical sparring?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most intriguing relationships is between Marx and Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel,
Okay, yeah.
another giant of German philosophy.
Right.
Marx was deeply influenced by Hegel, particularly by this concept of the dialectic.
Dialectic. Remind us what that is again?
Right. So the dialectic, it's this idea that progress happens through the clash of opposing forces.
Yeah.
Ideas, contradictions.
Okay.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Right.
It's this constant push and pull that drives history forward.
Okay. So Marx borrows this idea of clashing forces from Hegel, but then what? Where do they diverge?
Well, Hegel was an idealist.
Okay.
He believed that it was the progress of ideas that ultimately shaped the world.
Right.
Marx, however, gave Hegel's dialectic this materialist twist.
Okay.
He argued that it wasn't ideas, but the material conditions of life, the economy, technology, access to resources.
The stuff.
Exactly, the stuff. That's what truly drove historical change.
So instead of a battle of ideas, it's a battle for bread and butter.
Yeah.
Control of the actual stuff.
Precisely. And this is where Marx really locks horns with thinkers like Adam Smith.
Right.
The champion of capitalism.
Right. Laissez-faire and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Smith saw capitalism as this self-regulating system, right? That it would eventually lift everyone up.
Right.
Marx vehemently disagreed. He saw capitalism as inherently unstable, prone to crises, and ultimately unsustainable.
Marx versus Smith. Now that's a showdown for the ages. But here's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Was Marx right? Is capitalism inherently flawed?
That's the question that continues to spark debate, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, Marx's predictions about the exact timeline of capitalism's downfall might have been off.
Okay.
We haven't seen a global workers' revolution leading to, a communist utopia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No workers' paradise on the horizon just yet. But if his predictions were off, why are we still talking about him today? Why do his ideas still resonate with so many people?
Because while the specifics of his predictions might be debated, his diagnosis of capitalism's inherent problems remains, I think, shockingly relevant. We're still grappling with many of the same issues he identified.
Like what?
Massive wealth inequality, the exploitation of workers, cycles of boom and bust, the unchecked power of corporations.
It's like he gave us this toolkit to, diagnose the ills of capitalism, even if his, prescribed treatment plan hasn't fully come to pass.
Exactly. And think about it, right? When we talk about raising the minimum wage or regulating the gig economy, reining in the power of big tech, I mean, those are all conversations rooted in Marx's critique of, these power imbalances within capitalism.
Totally. So if Marx were a millennial today, doom scrolling,
Right.
what would he make of our hyper-connected, hyper-capitalist world?
He would probably be, I think, fascinated by how capitalism has simultaneously mutated and amplified in the 21st century.
How so?
Well, take the gig economy, for example,
Oh,
with its, precarious work, lack of benefits.
Right.
That would probably strike him as a prime example of how capitalism adapts to exploit, new forms of labor.
It's true. It's like the Uber driver, the freelance writer, the TaskRabbit assembler, they're all kind of living out this Marxian idea of alienation in real time.
Yeah.
They're working in isolation, often lacking that sense of connection to a larger purpose or, any sort of collective power.
Yeah. Precisely. And I think the irony wouldn't be lost on him either. Like, technology, with its potential to liberate us from, drudgery, has instead created these new avenues for, like, digital labor and surveillance.
Right, right.
Every click, every online purchase, it generates data,
Right.
which is a new form of labor, right?
Yeah.
A source of immense profit for these tech companies, often without, our full awareness or consent.
Totally. It's like we're all unpaid interns for big tech in our spare time.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you've got, tech billionaires amassing this wealth that would make even like the most ruthless 19th century industrialist blush.
Right. And Marx would see that as like a glaring example, right, of how capitalism concentrates wealth and power in the hands of a select few,
Right.
while the vast majority are just struggling to stay afloat. He'd likely point to, the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the shrinking middle class, the rise of precarious work, as evidence that these contradictions of capitalism are as sharp as ever.
So, like, where does that leave us then? If Marx was right about capitalism's problems, but his, solutions haven't materialized, what's the way forward?
That's the, million-dollar question, isn't it? The
Yeah.
one we're all wrestling with. I don't think Marx would claim to have all the answers,
Right.
but he would definitely insist that we keep those tough questions alive.
Right.
He would urge us to, to look beyond the surface, to understand the root causes of inequality and injustice, and to, never stop striving for a more just and equitable world.
A powerful message indeed. Karl Marx, a thinker who, challenged us to question everything, to view the world through the lens of, power and economics. We may not agree with all of his conclusions, but I think his insights into capitalism, the human cost of exploitation, the potential for collective action, it continues to resonate really deeply.
Absolutely. He'd probably be thrilled we're still, grappling with these ideas well into the 21st century.
I think so, too. To all our listeners, we would love to hear your thoughts. How do you see Marx's ideas playing out in today's world? What resonates with you? What do you challenge? Join the conversation because, as Marx himself said, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it.
Well said.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of Karl Marx. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.